Hello? So, good afternoon. My name is Josef Micallef, and I will be presenting practically speaking, this is my thesis argument which I did for the MSc in Digital Games here in Malta. I think I changed the title a bit. I named it as a phenomenological view of reflective self-consciousness in gaming experiences. I'm also going to be looking at self-transformation, but I'm not going to be looking at self-transformation in a similar way to what Jonathan did. I'm going to be looking at self-transformation in relation and self-reflection in relation to the player who's playing the game. But I will be using Ricoeur's theory as well, so he pretty much covered everything in that respect, so I wouldn't need to really go into it that much. So basically, the aim of the study is to establish a framework of self-reflection in player experience based on both subjectivity and... Oh, sorry. Full screen. There you go. Okay, so the aim is to establish a framework of self-reflection in player experience based on both subjectivity and selfhood. And I will be looking at subjectivity through Edmund Husserl's theory of self-consciousness, and I will be looking at selfhood in relation to Paul Ricoeur's narrative identity theory. So this study will pretty much focus, even my thesis focused on the experience of avatar-based games that are considered ludic. And by ludic, I mean games that have traditional rules, objectives, and outcomes. Whether these are created by the designer or whether these are created by the players they go along, doesn't really make a difference. So I am not looking at self-reflection in relation to non-games, which are considered non-games, such as Proteus or TRS, sorry Dan. But I'm not excluding that this framework that I'm trying to establish of self-reflection cannot be applied to non-avatar-based games and non-ludic games, and that is in fact what I would want to go on with my research. So the aim is, first of all, is to give a phenomenological background to subjectivity and self-consciousness, and this was my basically holy grail in my thesis, this book by Dan Zahavi, Subjectivity and Selfhood. And so I used Dan Zahavi's interpretation of Edmund Husserl as a foundation of the study of subjectivity and self-consciousness. So without further ado, let's start with Edmund Husserl. Now, Husserl defines self-consciousness as a minimal form of pre-reflective self-awareness, without an ego or I subject overlooking the experience. So basically, as you are listening to me now, you're probably not reflecting on yourself. But according to Husserl, you're still self-conscious. So you don't need this reflective self-awareness. You don't need to reflect to be self-conscious. And he basically divides self-consciousness, pre-reflective self-consciousness, in two. He says that every act is consciousness of something that is intended towards something, but there is also a consciousness of every act. And this idea of this pre-reflective self-awareness, first of all, it was reiterated by many other philosophers, including Henri, Merleau-Ponty, and even Heidegger, who actually was the student of Husserl and then took it against Husserl later on in his life. Even though he came from a different phenomenological angle, he still talked about a pre-reflective self-acquaintance. And this idea of that I just mentioned, this two-way way of looking at the pre-reflective state, was also reiterated by Sartre through the idea of the positional and non-positional consciousness. But anyway, we just give a metaphor. And let's say you're driving a car and you're going to work in the morning. As you're driving, you are conscious of the road in front of you. Hopefully, you are also conscious of the fact of the street you have to take to go to work. So this is consciousness of. And this is when you're basically intended towards something. But while you're driving, you still have a pre-reflective awareness of everything that surrounds you. So if you have your kids at the back screaming and shouting or talking and discussing anything, you might not be intended towards it, but you are still aware of it. And at the same time, you are aware of your peripheral vision, and you might be aware of the discussion that's going on the radio. So this pretty much sums up the pre-reflective self-awareness. Now, where we are most interested in is this second layer of consciousness, which moves on to consider a reflective self-consciousness that builds on this pre-reflective self-consciousness. Now, reflective self-consciousness refers to the ability for a person to make themselves the object of consciousness. And this objectifying state, where the ego or I subject emerges, will be considered the condition for self-reflection. Now, this would look something like this. So you are still driving the car, you're still pre-reflectively aware of the road in front of you and your surroundings, but you are also making yourself and your experience of driving the object of your own consciousness. So this is where you might start to self-reflect and ask questions such as, why do I hold the steering in this way and not in this way? Why do I always take these roads to go to work in the morning? Why is it that I still have this job? Why is it that I still work in a 9-to-5 job? And you can even basically start asking all sorts of existentialist questions. And this is according to this act of self-reflection that happens through this self-reflective consciousness, might have some benefits. And first of all, as I already mentioned, when you are in this reflective state, you tend to distance yourself from yourself. And you make yourself as other to you. Now, in doing this, you can then start, again, self-reflecting. And you will, in doing so, you will generate knowledge about yourself. You will then evaluate yourself. And hopefully, or possibly, then alter. You can create a sense of alteration where you can start, you can basically have what's called self-transformation. But more about this later on. How can we account for this in games, in the experience of games? Now, first of all, I would like to assume for a second that basically to discuss playing through an avatar as my experience as a player, we must first consider the avatar as an extension of the player's subjective experience. And we can account for this through various theories, such as the body schema theory, embodiment relations, the avatar as a prostatic extension, and also self-presence, which looks at the idea of the virtual self as being your actual self. Now, this is something which I'm deciding not to focus too much on in this presentation, but there's more detail in the paper, and you can ask me questions as well. So, assuming the avatar is, I'm assuming here that the avatar is considered an extension of ourselves. Now, if we have to look at this state, the reflective self-consciousness in player experience, how can we account for it? Now, a form of othering and distancing is evident in Daniel Vella's phenomenological duality in his player-figure relation model. It's really weird because it right in front of me. It's quite surreal. Anyway, this basically phenomenological duality in the player-figure relation model looks at two ways in how we relate to the playable figure, or let's call him the avatar. Now, in the subjective mode of relation, players perceive the game world through the avatar, and he calls this the ludic subject, where we are playing through the figure. So this pretty much links with, the idea of embodiment or self-presence. But what I'm most interested in here is the objective mode of relation Daniel Vella mentions, which is the idea that the playable figure becomes itself present to the player as an object of perception. And he refers to this as playing with the figure. Now, in this objective mode of relation, seems to equate with the idea of reflective self-consciousness mentioned earlier, where you are making yourself as the object of consciousness. In the objective mode of relation, similarly, you're making your avatar as your own object of perception. And if we look at the avatar as ourselves, then basically we could equate that with theoretically, phenomenologically, we could equate that with the idea that you are still making yourself the object of perception. The objective mode of relation primarily analyzes a player's mode of relation with the avatar. And I argue that this mode can be viewed as the condition upon which then self-reflection is enabled in a game, rather than being synonymous with self-reflection. So if you are seeing the avatar as separate from you, not necessarily self-reflecting upon the actions and decisions you take in the game, but you can see it as a condition upon which self-reflection is enabled. Now, there are certain limitations if I had to look at self-reflection in relation to subjectivity. First of all, self-reflection and transformation and analyzed in relation to subjectivity can be applied to the experience of non-interactive media as well. So, if we look at film, for instance, when we're watching a film, I might experience a situation where the character in the film is passing through certain situations which you can identify with. And even though you don't play a film, you watch a film, these situations that the character is passing through can still enable you to self-reflect. So the question is, how do we build an analysis of self-reflection that is based on the characteristics of interactivity, and namely action, processes, and feedback? Now, to account for this in my thesis, I used, my whole first chapter was based on Katja Kwastek's book, Aesthetics of Interaction in Digital Art. Now, Kwastek links various characteristics of interactive media art with the characteristics of play, and this was really helpful to me. And it's much more elaborate, but I try to sum them up for the sake of this presentation as action, processes, and feedback. Interactive media has action, processes, and feedback, and even play as an element of action, processes, and feedback. Now, how do we link this with phenomenology? And this is where the narrative identity theory comes in. Now, Paul Ricoeur's hermeneutic approach to phenomenology calls for a narrative understanding of self that is constantly evolving. Similar to what John said, he referred to the ipse state, which Ricoeur refers to as selfhood. It's just a Latin word for selfhood. And this is, again, constantly evolving. Now, this narrative identity theory is temporal, and built on our interactions with the other. And the other includes people, and situations, and even possibly animals. Now, this is clearly evident in the characteristics of interactivity as well, including digital games. So, for instance, we'll have to look at action. When we play a game, we take actions and interact, and thus interact with the other. Games are processual, and thus temporal. And apart from that, our interactions with the other generally results in feedback. So if we look at interactivity or the experience of playing a game, it pretty much falls in line with the experience of the narrative identity theory. Now, utilizing Ricoeur's theory, games can allow for self-reflection that is based on the virtual situations the player find themselves in, the actions they take faced with the situation, and the feedback they receive for their actions. And self-reflection based on this narrative identity theory in games results in the transformation of an entity's selfhood. And I kept this entities for now, so the word entity, so I would surprise in the end for the conclusion. I don't know how many of you played Life is Strange. I'm sure a lot of you here have, at least know what it is. So in Life is Strange, and this can pretty much apply to any normal ludic game, but I think Life is Strange pretty much encapsulates what I want to say here. You play as Max, who is the girl who you can't see, basically. And a big feature of the game is that the player has to take certain actions. Max has to take certain decisions, And she can also reverse these decisions and take, how are we at that? 5 minutes, perfect. She can take certain decisions and then reverse the decisions and whatever. Now, one of the first decisions, and this was my case study for my thesis, by the way, one of the first decisions she takes in the first episode of Life is Strange is whether to report this guy who almost murdered Max's friend. Max realizes basically and stops the guy from doing it. And she can decide to report Nathan, the guy who was going to kill her friend, to the principal of the school, or she can decide to hide the truth or not. Now, this is already a situation in which player is put on the player is put on spot, where he has or she has to decide whether to report Nathan or hide the truth. Now, already a situation like this is probably going to allow a degree of self-reflection. The player can be in a position where he or she might say, okay, what should I do here? Should I report Nathan or should I hide the truth? How does this action reflect my values as a character? Sorry, as a human being. Once you do take that action, you also receive feedback for the action. Now you get sort of immediate feedback there and then, but the proper feedback you get in the game later on in subsequent episodes. Now once you get feedback for that action, a player is then is free again to self-reflect and say, based on the feedback that they receive, think about what they could do in the future or not do in the future in similar situations or not. So basically, I'd like to reconcile subjectivity and selfhood in relation to self-reflection and transformation. First of all, as exemplified earlier, in making herself and her experiences the object of consciousness, the player might become reflective on her own subjective experiences. But if we're looking at subjectivity, subjectivity simply looks at how we relate to the world from where we see. Self-reflection may also be built around the player's actions and feedback, and this is where the narrative identity theory came in by Paul Ricoeur. Now, theoretically, as players play through their own human subjectivity, if they are taking the objective mode of relation, then transformation as a result of the self-reflection happens arguably not only in the avatar, but also in the player's own selfhood. And that is pretty much it. These are my references, and now time for some self-reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Questions?
Thank you. This might be one with Ricoeur rather than you, but if narrative identity, according to that theory, is a constantly changing, evolving process, is it appropriate to use words like transformation? Because transformation suggests a significant phase shift from one point to another, but the theory at the same time is talking about a constant evolution. So evolution and transformation seem to be something of a contradiction, because the transformations which are happening may be so small that is there a danger that it can suggest a
looks too big as a word, right?
Yeah, but it's it feels a little misleading towards the end of it, because I think I have no problem with the argument at all, but then when you land on the term transformation at the end, probably actually most of the transformations are evolutions. I don't know if this is being semantic about it, but it just sort of struck me at the end of it. What do you feel about that?
No, I think, yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, it's not something that I really went into my thesis. I was looking at how, I do tend to believe that transformations happen constantly. It's not like something where you take a decision in the game and suddenly like, oh my god, I had this big transformation. But no, it's not something that I actually really went to. I think it's a very valid point. But Paul Ricoeur himself does speak about transformation of the selfhood. I think there are certain situations, like in Life is Strange, where the decisions you take sometimes will require a greater degree of self-reflection, and possibly, it's not necessarily the case that a player will always self-transform. In fact, I argued in my thesis that sometimes decisions are taken impulsively, without actually you yourself thinking about it. I don't know, I could be playing Life is Strange and I could be really tired and I could be like, you know what, to hell with it, I'll just report Nathan, I don't really care about it. And you don't really put too much thought or reflection into it. So yeah, I think it's a good point. I don't know how to answer your question though, in the sense that I think there are still certain actions you take which can enable a greater degree of transformation. But I didn't really dissect transformation in a manner that I can say. Yeah, I think I agree with you in the sense that we're all constantly transforming ourselves. And reflection helps this transformation, sometimes on a very minuscule level, and sometimes on a larger level, or sometimes not.
Thank you. I think it might be interesting to hear you elaborate a bit on how you actually contextualize or how you use the notion of feedback.
Cybernetics.
Yeah, but cybernetics. Okay, but then because hearing you, for me, it seemed to be very much more the idea, more a sociologically informed idea of feedback that can somehow be apprehended cognitively, whereas in cybernetics, I mean, it is this like broad boundary concept is very much also used for much more technical notion of feedback, any information that comes back to you, which can be very abstract or formal.
Yes.
So do you take that into account also? Or?
So, okay. In terms of feedback, what I was looking for in terms of interactivity, referring again to your work, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was looking at how interactive media art, as you mentioned yourself in the first chapter, if I'm not mistaken, that for the actions they take, you always get a sort of response back. Now, this could be anything in a game. And Life is Strange, it's quite, the feedback I'm talking about is quite social, like you're saying, but it could be feedback you get in something like Tetris. Now, I didn't really look at Tetris because it's not an avatar-based game, although I do believe that the feedback you get from the movements you make in the game are still valid, is still valid feedback. And from that feedback, you can still transform, because you can still start looking at how you can maybe play better in order to get better scores in the game and reach higher levels in the game. And players in that case are still getting feedback for the actions they take. And through that feedback, they can then reflect on what they're doing maybe wrong in the game and then possibly transform. So I don't know if this answers your question. It does not have to be really, in a sense, like Life is Strange.
Thank you for that. I'd like to ask, I guess, you've kind of addressed part of it here. I'm wondering, thinking about that moment in Life is Strange, I really wanted to think of it in terms of, okay, let me reflect what would I do, or what would I kind of in the position of Max do. However, the anxiety there was more connected with what impact is this going to have on the story further down the line, next episodes. This kind of attitude of consequences, rather than actually reflecting in the moment on my actions. But would that, I mean, there was no sort of, it was less connected to a kind of personal morality, and more connected to almost a mercenary view of like what impact is this going to have. But by kind of bringing in Tetris there, would it be the same kind of...
No, exactly. No, I mean, this is something which, again, was a stumbling block. While I was doing my thesis, I didn't mention it on purpose because of a matter of time. When we're taking actions, like you said yourself, you're not necessarily reflecting on yourself. You could be intended towards the situation, and that would fall back to Husserl's pre-reflective self-awareness. You are conscious of that situation at that time, and you're taking an action, but you're not necessarily reflecting on the action you're taking. But I argue that certain actions certain situations you find yourself in have more possibility for the player or the actual human being to put himself and his subjectivity as his own object of consciousness, but not necessarily. I know that maybe this opens up room for ambiguity in a way, but it was never meant to be clear-cut and set on stone.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if that answers your question, though.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, maybe a last question from my side. I'm wondering about the notion of transformation as well, and I wonder how, to what extent that maybe is an ideology, in the sense that I think there are a lot of people who try to transform themselves, and the only way in which they transform is that they know better and better who they are by failing to transform. Like people who do a diet. People who do a diet and just fail, or people who try to learn an instrument and just fail, and they learn ever better who they are by not transforming, by just knowing how they fail in their process to transform. How do you account for it?
Can you rephrase that? How does this work? Do you press it?
Let's play.
Let's play? Could you rephrase that? I didn't really...
I think I can. I will.
Okay.
So what I'm thinking is, maybe, so there's Sutton Smith spoke of play as rhetorics of progress. And I'm sometimes afraid that this whole idea of transformation might have maybe a neoliberal agenda behind it or something like that. So it's an idea that is rather imposed on people and maybe doesn't really exist. And my example is that there are many people who try to transform by using certain technologies, like for instance doing a diet and failing, or just trying to do sports and still don't become more sportive. But the only way in which they transform is that they know better who they have always already been.
That's the transformation. Because if you are learning something about yourself and after the experience of failing to do a diet, I would still consider that part of transformation. You don't actually have to get thinner to transform yourself. But if you're learning something new about yourself or about your, let's say, character or self, I would still consider that as a transformation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.